Last year, as I was beginning to get my firewood ready for the coming winter, I was going through the woods with my skidder and picking up old hard maple tops from trees that I had dumped the prior year when I was cutting logs. When I arrived at the skidway to drop off the load, there was no load behind me. Harumph! The brake on my winch started slipping, allowing the cable to pull out when there's a load on it. So the load gets farther and farther behind as you go. Then, of course, I had to winch the load back and drag them through the dirt, getting the tops even dirtier for my chainsaw. Oh, joy! When the load is winched up right behind the skidder as it's supposed to be, the winch pulls the load up and then the winch brake holds the load up off the ground, so it doesn't get nearly as dirty as if the entire log, or in this case treetop, drags through the dirt. Well, I really didn't have a lot of time to take my winch apart and fix it proper last year, so my workaround was to climb up on the back of the skidder and hook a short chain up to my chokers to keep them from pulling the cable out. And it did work, but it's kind of sketchy going up on the back of the skidder for every load. It's a little precarious climbing up there all the time, and in my opinion, a recipe for disaster. It's already kind of dangerous going in the woods and running the chainsaw, dumping trees, running heavy equipment, all that good stuff. Then when you add more foolishness like this, that's kind of over the line. So I really need to fix the brake on this winch so it doesn't do that anymore. That is my mission for today. Well, here we are, present day. Time to work on the old Gearmatic 19 winch. I've never worked on one of these winches before, so I have no clue what's going on in there. But it's time to find out. I know I need to pull this cover off and have a look in there. The two hydraulic lines go in this side, one to the clutch and one to the brake, so I know they're in there somewhere. The handbrake looking lever on the right side of the seat is what operates the winch. Forward releases the brake, center locks the brake, and the rearward position actuates the clutch to drive the winch. I did pull this little cover off of here once before to bleed the hydraulic lines on this thing, but that's as far as I got into this winch. So that's where the clutch line goes into the winch itself. So I'm going to pull this bigger cover off and have a look. I'm going to leave one bolt in there to make sure this cover doesn't fall off. Looks like it's made out of cast iron and is extremely heavy. If it falls off, it would probably break my toe, and that would be undesirable. I got a drip pan in there too, so when I pull the cover off, just in case oil comes running out, it doesn't go all over the ground. Well, so much for the cover falling off. Seems like it's on there pretty good. Oh, I see. It's threaded to put bolts in there to pull the cover off. See that threaded hole? So you use the cover bolts to thread in there and push the cover off. There's one on the bottom too. I guess the boys at Gearmatic were thinking of all eventualities when they designed this winch. Good job, fellas. Well, that bolt definitely split the case. Let me get this pry bar in there and see if I can pry this thing loose. Well, it's still pretty tight, but there's another threaded hole on the bottom, so I'm going to run another bolt in there. The hole is full of dirt and crap, so I'm going to have to clean out this hole before I can thread anything in there. Hit it with some PB Blaster. See if I can blow that junk out of there. I might as well take this bolt and put it in there, since I did such a good job on the top half. There we have it. It's loose. I better take this clutch line off of here. It's a lot easier to do it now than when I have a 100-pound cast iron cover dangling off of it. Guess I can pull out my safety bolt also, now that it's free and clear. Better pull this line completely off of there. That's going to be a problem the way it is right now. I'll just put it right here so it doesn't get lost. Alright, here we go. Get this baby off of there. I'm just going to throw a couple of bolts back in these puller holes, so I got something to hang on to when I pull this cover off of here.
Okay.
Oh, it's not that bad. I thought it was going to be heavier than that. Well, there's the bands. Brake bands on the outside. See the drum in there. Sorry about the glare. The sun isn't cooperating this morning. Anyway, there's the slave cylinder for the clutch. And the clutch shoes are on the inside there. I'm going to have to pull this little axis cover off of there, it looks like, to get the brake apart. There's a slave cylinder on top of this rod that runs the brakes. And there's two brake bands, the outer one and the inner one. Looks to me like the smaller outer band engages the bigger one on the inside. There's a big high pressure spring that pushes up on the brake rod, and that's what actually engages the brakes. And here's a sneak peek of what that spring looks like right before I pulled it and after I pulled it. So the slave cylinder up on top releases the brakes as opposed to applying the brakes. So I need to pull this little cover off the bottom to release the tension from the spring. The spring tension needs to be released before I can pull the brake shoes out. Pretty tight, but I got the outside one cracked loose. Oh, the wrench slipped off. That's not good. Uh-oh, wrench slipped off again. I'm gonna have to find a 6-point to get in there. This 12-point just wants to slip off of there. Well, I know for a fact I don't have any 6-point box end wrenches, so I'm gonna have to pull this little cover off the bottom so I can get a 6-point socket in there. That's the only way this bolt's coming out of there. There it goes. Looks like the mice have built a happy home in here. Sorry guys, you gotta go. No free rides around here. Well, there's my little access panel. Now I just gotta find a 6-point socket. Well, I dug around and managed to find a 6-point socket and a little cheater bars, so see if I can get this thing out of here. There we go. Cracked it loose. No problemo. These bolts are quite long for the take-up of that coil spring. Takes a little bit to get them out of there. I'm going to see if I can work this little pry bar in there to take the tension up off the little plate so I can get those screws out of there a little easier. Well, I got the little plate off the bottom and the spring out of there finally, so I need to see if I can get this slave cylinder off the top. Got the bolts out, just need to persuade it to loosen up a little bit. There she goes. There we go. There's the winch brake slave cylinder. Well, there's that bottom cover that was holding the brake actuator spring in place. And there's the brake actuator spring. Now to pull the brake actuator rod out of here so I can get at these brake bands. Looks like I'm gonna have to pull this outer band out before I can get that actuator rod out. There it is. There's the narrow outside band. And there's the winch brake actuator rod. Oh yeah. Okay. This pin holds a secondary brake band to the winch housing. The other end of the band is actuated by the smaller brake band. When it grabs, it pushes up on a lever that clamps down on the secondary brake band. Now that the pin is out, the secondary band should come right out of here too. We get this clutch line out of the way. I connected it earlier just to see how this stuff all worked. Now I gotta take it off again because it's right in my way. And there we go, the secondary brake band. About twice as wide as the primary, the first stage. Looks like some oily residue on there. Lots of pad left though. I think I could just clean it up and put it back together. Some oily residue on the brake drum. I'm pretty sure that's why it's slipping. I'll need to clean this up, get all this residue out of here. And there you go, there's a closer look at that brake drum. You can see the oily residue on there. I'm gonna have to clean all that out of there. And there's the brake bands sitting on top of the cover. I'm gonna have to clean those up. There's lots of meat on these brake bands. Lots of pad left. I just need to clean all that oily residue out of there, and I think that'll fix it. I have a can of brake parts cleaner to take this oily residue off of here. This is the narrow band, I guess you'd call it the primary brake band for the winch brake. And here's the wider secondary band for the winch brake. Need to get this baby cleaned up also with some brake parts cleaner. I guess that ought to just about do it. Need to top off this reservoir for the winch controller before I can bleed the system. .3 brake fluid, that's what it takes. There's enough fluid indicator. In order to clean the brake drum on the winch, I need to turn it because I can only access a little bit of it at a time. So I'm going to pull this cable out and turn the drum a little at a time. Clean a little bit, pull it out a little bit, and so on. I'm using fuel oil to take the majority of this oily residue off of here. Okay, there we go. Pull the cable out, turn the drum some more. Right about here I figured out that I can turn this drum by hand and I don't have to go all the way around and pull the cable out, which speeds things up a little bit. Hey, I might be slow, but at least I'm inefficient. Okay, I tried turning the drum here and it kind of got stuck, so I gotta go pull the cable out and turn it. There we go. There's some kind of deposits on parts of this drum, so I'm going to use a little Scotch-Brite to clean it up, get it nice and clean. Okay, that drum's kind of stuck again. I'll pull on the cable and turn it. Keep it going here, cleaning this baby up. Get her nice and clean. Put a little fuel oil on here to work with the Scotch-Brite. Try to get that junk off of there. There you can see some of those deposits I'm trying to clean up a little bit. Okay, I think I'm going to go with that. Now to take all the fuel oil residue off, I'm going to use some brake parts cleaner. Do one final cleanup on this drum. Get all of the residue off of it. There we go. That baby looks pretty clean. Mighty fine, mighty fine. I guess I gotta clean up this old RTV off of here also. I'm gonna have to put some fresh stuff on when I put this cover back on. But it ain't gonna work too good if I don't take all this old stuff off of here. And a little compressed air to blast all the silicone particles out of here. Don't need those riding around inside my winch. I happened to notice when I was looking over my components that this pin that goes through the little lever on this brake actuator rod is broken. And there's a piece of it missing. I'm going to have to address that. I got this ceramic brake lube stuff when I was working on my dump truck brakes. I think I'm going to use this to put on the pivots for these little pins inside of here. I believe they need some kind of lubricant on there. And this stuff should work pretty good since it's designed for brakes. And this is a brake, so I'm going to use this stuff. Keep those pin pivots lubed. And there's a closer look at where those brake actuator pivot pins ride inside the winch housing. You see I put a little bit of grease on there. And of course I got some on the brake drum too, so I'm going to have to wipe that off of there. And clean it up with some brake cleaner. We can't have no oily, greasy residue on there. Well, I think we could start putting this baby back together. Step one is this big secondary brake band. Put that in first. It goes on the inside. Need to make sure the pin drops into the hole in the housing. I'm going to grease up this anchor pin for the secondary brake band. Put some of this ceramic grease on there. I think it just seems like it should have something on there, so that's what I'm going to do. And then anchor the one side of the secondary brake band. There you can see the pivot lever pin that's actuated by the primary brake band. Speaking of which, time to install the primary brake band. Just got to make sure it lines up with these pins. The backside of the primary band goes over that lever pin which actuates the secondary brake band. I'm going to put a little bit of this ceramic grease on here as well. It just seems like it should have something on there. This winch brake is a really ingenious design as far as I'm concerned. The primary band is engaged by the spring, the coil spring on the bottom, which pushes on that bottom hole there. And when it grabs a hold of the drum, it rotates and pushes up on the lever to engage the secondary band. Good job, Gearmatic. 2 thumbs up from Niami Woods. I need to address this broken pin on the actuator rod. I dug around and the only thing that I found that anywhere near resembles the right size pin is this little clevis clip thing. So I'm going to see if I can make this work. It's too tight in the housing to put this pin in there complete like this, so I'm going to have to trim it to make it fit inside of there. And there we go, I trimmed it shorter. So I'm going to see if I can make this thing work. I think I'm going to assemble it and then stake the pin in there so it stays in position, and then put it back together. And I have a high level of confidence that this is actually going to work. I feel good about it. I'm going to put some of my ceramic lube on this pivot. Seems like it should have some. Let me try to clean off the excess so it doesn't end up on my brake bands. Defeat the purpose of what I'm doing here today. Now I can slap this baby back together. Need to move this outer band so I can sneak this actuator rod in there. There we go. Get all this stuff lined up. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Looking good. Now the actuator spring goes in the bottom, which makes the whole thing work. I'm going to have to use my little pry bar to take the tension off the plate so I can get the bolts started. Well, I guess if one pry bar is good, 2 pry bars is even better. I'll get these bolts started yet. There we go, got one started. And here comes the second one. I don't have a gasket for this slave cylinder, and I pretty much shredded the old gasket when I took it apart, so I'm just using some of this silicone gasket maker for a gasket. And I need to bolt this baby on there and torque it down. Oh yeah. And of course I got to run a bead of silicone around this housing for the big cover. Keep the water out of there. And here goes the big cover. And a little persuasion to get it to drop into place. Now that I got this winch back together, I need to do an operational check. Take it out in the woods, hook onto a heavy load, make sure it doesn't slip. That'll be in the next video. Make sure you come check it out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Thumbs up, baby.